Hey, this is Real Sankara Hours. Real Sankara Hours. Follow us at Sankara Hours on Twitter. This is Adam Hudson. Follow me at Adam Hudson 5 on Twitter.
And this is Peter MGunn. Follow me at MGunnPeter.
Yeah, just some quick housekeeping. Follow us at follow us on donate to our Patreon. $5 a month, you get bonus episodes, so double the content for $5 a month. Patreon.com/Real Sankara Hours. So again, Patreon.com/Real Sankara Hours. We're also on SoundCloud. We're on Spotify. And if you want to get our RSS feed to stay up to date with our upcoming episodes, go to our Podbean, realsankarahours.podbean.com. That'll be in the show notes. And you're going to want to follow us because we have our first guest. So you don't have to just listen to our voices. So I'm really excited. Kaitlin, Nick, why don't you guys introduce yourselves?
Okay, cool. I can go first. Thanks for having us. And I didn't even realize we were your first guest till 3 minutes ago. So thank you for giving us this opportunity.
I know, right? I feel honored.
I feel very honored. Yeah, so my name's Kaitlin Sopoci-Belknap. I'm on Twitter. My name is spelled with a K, Aitlin. And I live in Sacramento, California, and I do work with a bunch of different organizations, but the main one is Move to Amend, where I'm the national director. But as it relates to politics and electoral politics, these days I'm working with Movement for a People's Party, which I think we'll get to talk about, and I'll let Nick say more about that because he's the one who's been doing that for a while. But I've also been a Green for a long time, ever since I was 18, except for a week there where I re-registered as a Democrat this year for the very first time. It hurt a bit, but I did it for the team to vote for Bernie Sanders. And that's good enough for me right now. I'm outside, so if you hear birds, that's me.
Getting some vitamin D, natural vitamin D that helps your immune system.
And I'm Nick Brana. I live in the D.C. area in Virginia, and I've worked in politics for most of my adult life. For the Democrats for most of that time, for several years, until I left them in 2017. I worked for Bernie on his campaign in 2016, lobbied the superdelegates for him, helped Bernie found Our Revolution, the group he started after that, and then went on and formed the Movement for a People's Party for a major new progressive populist party in the United States.
Okay, yeah. So actually, before we get into the real nitty gritty stuff of why we're here, how's everyone doing with the quarantine? I'm in California. I'm in Pittsburgh, California, in the Bay Area, and I've at this point it's been a month and a half in shelter in place, and I'm just kind of used to it. And people are kind of wondering like, when is the quarantine gonna end? It's like no one really knows. So at this point, it's sort of like become this weird new reality. But yeah, how's everyone else holding up? Because this is very new for all of us.
Well, I'm doing okay. My biggest challenge, I'm in Sacramento, like I said, which is, where my house is. My biggest challenge is that I was going to go visit my family in New Mexico right before this, and was actually like kind of headed out. And then this happened, and my mother was supposed to get on she had qualified for the lung transplant list because she has an autoimmune lung disease and she needs a lung transplant. And then they shut down and stopped doing lung transplants. So she didn't go to Phoenix to do that, and now she's sheltering in place in Santa Fe, and everyone is, we're just really scared if she ends up in the hospital and something takes a bad turn, we might never see her. And so I'm doing fine, but that's my pretty fucked up thing that's in the background all the time, and trying to figure out whether I really should just go there, but then I would need to quarantine for 3 weeks because literally COVID-19 is like the worst thing that could happen to her, so there's no way I could bring that with me and have that go okay. So I have some things up in the air about where I'm gonna be and whether they'll even let us. So far, I think I could drive to New Mexico and probably be okay, but I don't know. I don't know. It feels precarious.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah, that's heavy.
Yeah, Peter or Nick or whoever wants to go.
Okay. Yeah. Like I'm still in Maine, Portland, Maine, where yeah, most of the city shut down. And I don't, I'm off. I'm on unemployment. I worked in a bar beforehand, and no one really knows when all that stuff's gonna come back. Presumably in the next month. But I don't know. It's following the way. It's like, oh well, we have to reopen the economy, but actually that's not really gonna help or anything. So I don't know what's gonna happen. Also, yeah, my life's very up in the air right now, so I'm just still trying to roll with it. Um, it's really, yeah, it's really kind of came at the worst time for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah. Nick?
I've been cooped up for the last month here in Virginia. They came down with a shutdown order, basically a shelter-in-place order, like 2 weeks ago. So I've basically just been locked up since then. But there's like been all these. I've been more busy than ever before because like of so much is happening politically now in the U.S. and as MPP is like this is the biggest breakdown in like the two parties, particularly the Democratic Party that I think we've seen in generations is happening right now with like millions of people basically refusing to fall in line with Biden.
Yeah. Yeah, actually let's just get right into it. Yeah, so like I mean, obviously Bernie Sanders dropped out last week. And for those of you who follow our show, just listen to our last episode because we did like kind of a sort of a post-mortem on his campaign because I think this episode will be a nice follow up from that. So but yeah, now like now everything is like pretty much squaring in. Everyone's putting their chips in with Biden, right? Like not everyone from the Bernie campaign, but a lot of people are like, okay, we gotta support Biden because Trump is this existential threat, right? And Bernie just came out with this joint live stream video with Joe Biden where did you guys see that?
Yes.
Yeah, and also there was an interview he did with the Associated Press where he was basically saying progressives who sit on their hands and don't support Biden are gonna enable Trump. So Bernie Sanders is basically saying pretty much the same thing everyone's saying which is that hey, you gotta support Biden. If you don't support Biden, you're gonna get Trump in office, and if you do that, you're the worst person in the world. There's all kinds of like, just even worse, like kind of disingenuous arguments. Like, hey, if you don't vote for Biden, you're privileged because you don't care about people of color. Me and Peter, we're both African American. It's like, okay, to that being said to us, it's like, okay, wait, what do you? It's even more disingenuous to say to people like to say to like black leftists like us, like, oh wow, you're gonna call us privileged? Like, yeah, it's such a privilege to be like, be a part of the demographic that's most likely to get killed by police. Yeah, that's a ton of privilege right there. Anyway, so
Yeah.
what it? Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
Oh, also, I seem to notice that most of the people who make that argument like have media jobs
Yeah.
that pay a lot more than $14 an hour. So
Yeah.
I don't know where they're getting this, but
So yeah, Kaitlin, Nick, what's your reaction to even Sanders saying like support Biden, everyone else say support Biden? What do you guys say to that?
Well, I can start. You can go out, and then Nick, I'm sure, can add in. But it's no surprise. Bernie said he was going to support the nominee, and he said he was going to support Biden. So, I think that was actually his first mistake, was not really challenging Biden. The constant kind of Oh, he's my friend. He'll be fine. He can beat Trump, even though he literally is probably the weakest nominee. I mean, certainly in our lifetimes, it's like the one person maybe that's worse than Hillary Clinton, Biden, because his brain doesn't even work. So, you know, him him falling into line was no surprise to me. What was a little bit, extra was so quickly turning around, endorsing him, and then saying that anybody who doesn't support Biden is irresponsible. That felt like, kind of a overly harsh slap in the face to many of his supporters that, a lot of people got into politics inspired by Bernie Sanders, and it just feels like irresponsible leadership. Also, he seems like he's got nothing to show for falling into line. Like, what did he get from Biden? So far, we haven't seen shit. So that's also, on the table of like, all right, you couldn't even get anything. You couldn't even demand anything.
I guess apparently he got a task force, so that's got to be something, right? He got a task force.
I stand by. He got nothing.
On Rising, if you guys have watched that show with Crystal Barrel and Cigar and Jetty, great show. And they said the task force is like worse than nothing.
Yeah, that's like the assignment where they're like, they just put him over there and try to get rid of him. I mean, I do wonder, like, I don't know. Part of me feels like a sucker for even going along with it, and that like back in the early days when people said Bernie was a sheepdog, they were right all along. I don't really understand like how he's feeling right now, or why he would just on a personal level, why he would humiliate himself like that. But that's why I'm not cut out for big DC politics, I guess.
And we got a taste of like this approach. Like it's not even going to work. That's going to be the ultimate like insult to injury, is that Bernie's, supporters are not just going to like, and he said this in an interview once, they're not just going to listen to him or anyone else, like tell that who tells them, oh, okay, now support like the antithesis of, who I am, or a Corp Wall Street candidate. It didn't work when he tried it with Hillary. He was bringing out tens of thousands of people, and like every rally that he went to, when I was on the campaign and I saw it, like, and then the minute he endorsed Hillary Clinton, he was, and he started campaigning for her, and he was bringing out 100, 150 people. It was pathetic, so like it's going to happen again, and the real tragedy is that and I feel like others like in the progressive movement and the left didn't learn their lesson from that first time, that you can't just like shame voters into supporting, your like neoliberal candidates and expect that that's going to like defeat Trump or produce anything like resembling working class politics.
Yeah. Like that's like, I mean, because like you guys, I think all of us to varying degrees have like long experiences in the quote unquote left. I'll say left in quotes because sometimes I get wary of saying there's an actual left in America. Like it's not like other countries where you have like organized like legitimate left wing parties. Like in India, for example, there's an actual communist party in the state of Kerala, and they've managed to do a pretty good job of dealing with coronavirus in India. So like there's an actual organized left in countries like India and parts of Europe, whereas America, it's like there are like, I feel like the Bernie Sanders campaign was inklings of an actual left, but there's no real organized left. But anyway, I think like all four of us have long experiences in left wing politics of some sort. And like one thing that's always kind of, it's just something that's like even when I think about it, it's like I want to like hit my head against the wall, because every 4 years we go through this, right? It's like, hey, this Democrat we have in office, they're not perfect, but if you don't vote for them, the apocalypse is going to happen. And it's the XYZ list of reasons of why you have to vote Democrat. And it's like, okay, we had that with, we can even go with Obama, right? Vote for Obama in 2008. His response to the crash is pretty weak. And then you also saw the explosion of the targeted killing program and drone strikes under Obama, and even the assassination of a U.S. citizen. So like Obama pivoted even more to the right. Then when it was 2012, it's like, okay, yeah, Obama, like, he's not perfect, but Mitt Romney, if you don't vote for Obama, then Mitt Romney is going to bring the apocalypse. Okay, Obama won, and then also Black Lives Matter happened under Obama. Like, there's still systemic racism and police violence. 2016, it was Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, and then, Donald Trump. And people are like, okay, look, if you don't vote for Hillary Clinton, that means Donald Trump is going to be in office, and this is going to be hell. Well, obviously, Donald Trump is in office, and even Donald Trump himself isn't really like a major break with the system itself in terms of actual policy. So, but it's like the left is always caught in this sort of back and forth. Like, okay, we always go with this thing of like we have to do harm reduction and pick the lesser of two evils, but what do we get? Like, what do we actually get from that approach? Because in my experience, it's like, okay, at some point you have to be like, what's the alternative? So like, Nick, Kaitlin, like, what do you guys think the alternative is to this sort of two party kind of back and forth? It just seems like a sort of like a never ending struggle between like the left and the Democrats and the Republicans. And it's like, okay, even if we get a Democrat, like, what do we get? Because I never hear that, like, in all these like kind of lefty media circles. I never hear like, what do we actually get for if you're on the left or you care about progressive policy, progressive values? Like, what do we get? Because I don't. It to me, it doesn't seem like we don't really get anything. So what do you guys think? What do we actually get?
Children in cages hidden.
Yeah.
You go, Nick. You go.
You get the same savagery of the country with a smile and a civility and a decorum that Obama represented so well. It's like there really isn't a like political, particularly in the economic sphere or like foreign policy, like there isn't like meaningful difference between the Democrats and Republicans anymore. It's like they've taken that off the table, and so all you get is like the appearance of empire and of oligarchy, that just maybe looks a little better, a little more civilized to the corporate media. And like in terms of like what we do about it, I think we've got to do what the majority of Americans have wanted now for years, and like a growing majority, and we have to form a major new party in the United States, and like that's one of the things that Kaitlin and I are working on now. Is like this is a moment where like the Republican Party, when you look at what Trump's doing right now, like Trump suspended foreclosures and evictions. Like Trump has expanded Medicare more than Biden, at like in this moment. And, it's Republicans who like came up with the direct cash payments, for example. The Democrats actually fought it. Pelosi fought it. There's a Republic, the Republicans have proposed, a Republican has proposed a plan like to pay, 80% of people's wages, during coronavirus pandemic. And so it's like it's almost like you're seeing the Republican Party is becoming the populist party of this country, or like the closest thing it has to it. And then the Democratic Party is becoming the party of elites and the establishment party. Like I think you're seeing a reversal, and it's happened before in American history.
Yeah, I do want to say that is something that for people who are very concerned about the rise of fascism, that's something that sort of very much concerns me, is the Republicans sort of pivoting away from just being corporate bagmen, enthusiastically so, and starting to sort of competently, to whatever degree, understand, implement social welfare policies. And I still don't know how successful they're going to be, but they are certainly aware of the political gains to be made, while Democrats will just become, they'll be rendered pretty irrelevant, which I think is actually why I'm glad you guys are on here, because like you said, I think this is a unique historical opportunity, but at the same time, there have been multiple attempts in American history to sort of get a real Labor Party going, and they haven't necessarily succeeded for this reason or that. But in your estimation, why do you think this is sort of a unique historical moment?
Well, I think part of what we have is a large number of people who are younger and who don't have any sort of like memory of what we could get back to. So Biden's message of, make America great again in a different way than Trump is saying it doesn't really mean anything. I think we also have a Democratic Party that has shown itself to not actually care about winning all that much. They played their ultimate Trump card, which is that they are okay with Trump winning if it meant that they could beat Bernie Sanders. And it's less about Bernie Sanders because obviously he'll fall into line as a senator. They kind of know his game. But the movement that Bernie was able to coalesce and step in front of and bring together and all of that is what they're actually afraid of. And so that movement has a lot of energy, a lot of momentum. I think there's no guarantee that we're going to be able to pull this off because the threat of the, lesser of evils being Trump is one that's really real. But I mean, especially all of the messages that Democrats have been trying to use, Trump is a misogynist, Trump is a racist, all true. But Biden is a misogynist too. Right before this came out, the creeperness that everybody could tell and see was there, turns into something a lot more real and a lot more menacing. And then with, the rape allegation, I think it should be called rape because that's what it is. And then, Biden is absolutely racist. I mean, yeah, he can hide behind Obama, but, we all know his role in the crime bill and the incarceration of, African Americans, and he's anti-immigrant and all this. And so it's like they're sort of down to the bottom of the barrel and they don't even really give a shit. And so that momentum and energy that they might be able to kind of coalesce around a threat of Trump is just really hollow. And then if you add on the economic situation that people are in, plus this pandemic exacerbating it, plus the threat of climate change, which is much more of an existential threat than Donald Trump is, and, you're moving people towards kind of having nothing to lose. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate in history to people actually exercising their power. But I think we have more potential than we ever have, certainly in my lifetime, to do, what Nick just said, is break away and build a new party, and to have it not be, a third party, but rather to replace the Democratic Party because they have rendered themselves irrelevant, or maybe they will become the party of the elites. I don't really give a shit. This two-party system charade that we have that's not real is really the foe. And I think more people see that than ever before, and I also think that more people are ready to throw down. Can that be directed in a way that is organized and coherent? That's the task that's before us.
So I think there are two articles that back up what you guys are saying. So in 2018, October 26, 2018, there is a Gallup poll that says basically a majority of people in the United States think a third party is needed. This is 2018, but I think it's been pretty consistent since at least 2006. In 2006, 48% of of Americans thought that a third party was needed versus 45% who felt the two-party system was doing an adequate job. But in 2018, basically 57% said that there's a need for a third major political party, while 57% said that there was a need for a third major political party, while 38% of Americans believe the current two-party system is adequate. And that's, yeah, it's been pretty consistent. I mean, yeah, like going back to at least 2016, but the gap, there's been this huge gap since 2013, which is during the Obama years, actually, with Obama's second term. So yeah, like, I mean, what you guys are saying about like how this seems like a very an opportune time to challenge that two-party system. What you're saying is actually not that far off from what the majority of Americans think. And then there's this I don't know if you guys read the it's this satire site called The Hard Times. It's kind of like The Onion but for like punks and metalheads. Anyway, they had this satirical article that sometimes satire bleeds into reality, and this is one of them. And the headline said, "Moderate Democrats suggest working with coronavirus to find common ground." And there's a picture. Yeah, this is a satire site, and there's a picture of Chuck Schumer speaking, and then there's like the picture within the picture is the coronavirus, and this is like the fake Chuck Schumer quote, and he said, "It's our priority to find a solution everyone is happy with. Nancy Pelosi and I have been meeting with the coronavirus to try to work out a plan that both saves lives and kills people. We can't afford to be partisan or idealistic, and we have to be willing to make concessions. If that means giving up everything we want, so be it." Like, this is satire, but it's, I mean, this is a case where satire bleeds into reality. Yeah. And I think it's funny but sad because it just shows like how feckless the Democratic Party is. I mean, especially with the we did an episode I think a couple weeks ago on the so-called stimulus bill, which is essentially a Wall Street slush fund. Like, you know, we're reaching 30% unemployment, which is much higher than the Great Depression, by the way. At the height of the Great Depression, it was 25.
Like 20.
Yeah, like 25%. And now we're probably going to reach 30. And I'm pretty sure it'll probably go higher. We can probably reach, I wouldn't be surprised if we're able to reach 40%. And what did the Democrats get? Like $1,200 checks for 4 months that like we're probably not even gonna get because like the government's fucking that up too. Like they can't even hand out checks to people.
I think they started handing them out today, or at least I've been seeing people on Twitter saying they've been getting them, but that's only, you know, that's still nothing, and it's like they're taking it out of your refund, and you still have to pay taxes on it. It's a pretty bad situation.
Right.
I mean, but I like what you said about the difference between a third party and a party to replace the Democrats, because I think that is sort of the task that gets lost, or the distinction that gets lost, because there are a lot of people who may be dissatisfied with the Democrats, but for some reason or another, they think that, you know, a third party or that kind of party organizing is a waste of time, and they just think that, you know, I guess the Democrats are too powerful. But as I saw your interview on Jimmy Dornick, and you made a good point about how throughout history parties can collapse and spring up, and new parties spring up, you know, pretty quickly. And the Democratic Party is actually extremely old. I mean, it goes back about 200 years at this point. And so, you know, none of these things are sort of faded. But I guess, yeah, how do you explain the difference between what you're trying to do and, you know, perhaps other sort of smaller parties that have, you know, sort of hung around on the American left but haven't hit the big time, I suppose.
Yeah, there's several different things that I think need to be done differently. And like the first is that there's a context, like you can't discount the context that people are living in. That's the biggest factor. So you could create, a third independent party like the Green Party, but it could be during a time when people aren't suffering to the degree that they are now, and they aren't, they haven't lost faith in the institutions to the degree that they have now. I mean, now, like the figures that you were reading, Adam, it's like the majority of Americans want it now. The Democrats and Republicans have been, over the last several years, basically dissolving. Millions of people have been leaving them. They've been, identifying as independents instead. Independents are now the large plurality in the country, about 42% to about 27% Democrats and 27% Republicans out of all Americans. So that's one thing. Another thing, and the reasoning for that is, of course, that we've lived in an economic system where wages have stagnated, while the cost of everything, the cost of healthcare, the cost of student debt, the cost of a place to live, has all increased. The cost of food, and so people have just become more and more squeezed. And then, in terms of like what needs to happen differently too, is that it needs to be essential to be successful. It needs to kind of realign American politics, a major new party, and it needs to bring over working people, from across the political spectrum, basically, and say, like, we're creating a new coalition, around, like, we're getting money out of politics, we need Medicare for all, we need to, like, basically escape this student debt trap, around those really economically populist issues that like virtually everyone can agree on. Like money out of politics is like more than 90% agreement there.
Right. Yeah.
I think the other issue too is that it's kind of just it has to capture the moment. So I mean, the reality is the platform of the Green Party is really, it's Bernie Sanders' platform better. So it's in keeping with what people want and all of these, mainstream principles, populist principles. But what the image is that people have of the Green Party, is that it's marginal and small and has been losing ground for the last 20 years, and that's what's true. So but the reality is that whenever there has been a moment where a new party has coalesced and been able to burst into the mainstream and eclipse one of the parties that's already there, it generally has been a new party drawing on the work, organizing, ideas that have come from many different upstart parties before it. And so, that's how I see what the Green Party is, or the Peace and Freedom Party. Not that that's been wasted work. In fact, that's planted seeds to bring us to where we are now. But I don't think that it will work to say, come over here, where you have an image, whether it's, like Ralph Nader or Jill Stein or whatever, of something that doesn't really feel like it can seize the moment. And so that's part of, why I think that, that is the reason why I think that a People's Party with a new name, a different kind of tone, many more young people, many more people of color than the Green Party has ever been able to bring in mass, although, a lot of the leadership has been, old-time black and brown socialists. But still, it's more just, a messaging issue, rather than that there's been anything wrong with these ideas that have already been out there. And also that, to me, is a positive. It's like, we don't need to come up with the solution. We already know what the solutions are. We need to coalesce, we need to organize, and we need to demand power. But we don't actually have to come up with a plan. We already have the plans.
Yeah, like actually, another question I was thinking of, because Kaitlin, I know you've served in elected office, right? Like for the water district. Okay, yeah. And Nick, you were working in the Bernie campaign in 2016. Is that's right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the reason why I wanted to point that out is because so far, like in a lot of like lefty media spaces, and I've been involved in independent left wing media for a while as a freelance journalist. So I'm in touch with like that kind of that sort of ecosystem of left media, and a lot of like I guess the hip term is like breadtube, but like the left wing YouTube channels. And so far, like the chorus, as you to put it this way, like the chorus has largely been singing the same tune, which is that okay, yeah, we agree with the Green Party, we agree with those parties, but we live in a two-party system, and that's all we have, and we have to infiltrate the Democratic Party and take it over and get good progressive people in the Democratic Party. And I think, given your experience, especially Kaitlin, you since you've served in an elected office, because I noticed like both of you guys have an obviously very very different take than what the chorus of most of left wing media outlets. So yeah, because the one thing I've noticed is that like the argument is that like, hey, you don't know how the system works. We have to get in there and go in the system and like get good people within the Democratic Party, and then we can change it. And so that's why like whenever people bring up Jill Stein or the Green Party, the Peace and Freedom Party, like they're usually often like written off as like cranks or some other sort of label or word, right? But given both your guys' respective experience, what would you say to people who say that stuff? Who say like, yeah, we recognize the Democratic Party is flawed. We recognize it's dominated by a neoliberal, corporatist, pro-war establishment. But there's only two parties, and we have to take over the Democratic Party to get progressive change. And when it comes time to election time, just vote for the lesser of two evils, and then go from there. And by the way, I never know like what the next step is after voting Democrat. But what would you guys say? Because I definitely get into like the nitty gritty of like why working within the Democratic Party is not useful for anyone who cares about progressive to socialist to any kind of left wing values.
Well, I think Nick can speak more to that since he's done that. But a couple things I'll say just first is that, to Peter's point, it's like, what do you have to show for that what does that strategy have to show for itself? It has zero to show for itself. It has us moving backwards on every single one of these issues when, like I said earlier, we know what the policies are that we need, and we're moving further away from Congress or, the presidency, or at the state level, having them implemented. So, we've been told over and over again that that's what we need to do because that's the only option. And yet leadership who has been saying that has nothing to show for that strategy. So to me, you don't follow leaders that fail over and over and over again and then keep telling us we're going to do the same thing, but somehow or other, this next time it'll be different. And having worked as a Green, as an elected official in a nonpartisan office, I worked a lot with local Democrats, and that it just churns through them. I mean, these are good people who buy that message and then try their hardest, and they just get fucked. And if Bernie Sanders and the campaign, I mean, this is the one time in my life where I thought, okay, I mean, I obviously didn't need to register as a Democrat in order to vote for him, but I wanted to make sure that my vote was going to be, the most likely to be counted and there wouldn't be any bullshit. So rather than asking for a special, Democratic ballot, I just registered into the party. But I've never done that before. But with all of the momentum, with all of the energy, with all of the wonderful organizing that went into Iowa and New Hampshire and Nevada and all the work that was happening, the millions of dollars, the fundraising that he was kicking ass on, that's our money, collectively, that we were pouring in. People were putting in their time. We gave it our all. And what did we What do we have to show for it? A fucking task force. So AKA nothing once again. And it's like, how many times can you do that? And Nick has the experience of having worked within all that and what it did to him. And it caused him to leave the Democratic Party because he's not a fucking idiot.
Yeah, working with the superdelegates will make you leave the Democrats. That's for sure. If you stand for anything. Yeah, everything that Kaitlin said is spot on. And like, I mean, I just kind of want to take everyone through a brief history of attempting to reform the Democratic Party, like a brief modern history.
Please do. Yes, please.
In 2016, in 2015, Bernie, ran for the presidency, and he was deliberating actually about running for president as an independent or as a Democrat. And he actually had to be talked out of running as an independent. He was actually leaning towards that. He was, but some advisors like Jeff Weaver, his campaign manager, totally establishment guy, talked him out of it. And so he ran as a Democrat, and what happened? He got rigged. Like it was rigged against him, and he would have won in 2016 had it not been rigged against him. Okay. So, boom, wow, that was shocking, millions of people all of a sudden said, millions of people who had been, like, disengaged from politics and then, like, made that, like, mental and emotional leap of, like, reinvesting themselves in politics and saying, this system has never had anything to offer me, but, like, here's someone and I'm going to take a chance on them. And he was screwed out of it. It was rigged against him. All right, well, then those people said, the progressive movement said, well, gee, let's try to get something in the platform, right? All right, they screwed Bernie, but if we get something we get some platform changes, yeah, then like we can move the party. Well, it turned out the platform isn't worth the paper it's printed on because the party doesn't adhere to it. And in fact, the party went further than that. And in 2017, they passed something called a better deal, which was a new platform.
Yeah, I heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's shocking about this, and this was like, I didn't see I saw almost no one pick up on this, like how illegitimate it is for a political party to replace its platform selected by the delegates. Like, I know it was mostly Hillary delegates, but it's like, still, to say like, that thing you all passed, like, in our supposed process for determining policy, doesn't matter. We're passing a new one. And then we're not going to adhere to the new one either, And like, so that was the second thing, And then after that, progressives were like shocked about that. It's like, oh my God, the platform's fucking meaningless. And so then they thought, well, gee, maybe we can, maybe we can get Hillary Clinton elected and influence her. And boom, we saw what happened to that. Actually, it turns out you can't sell the epitome of the establishment in like a moment where people hate the establishment, and Trump won. And then people thought, well, maybe we can take over the Democratic Party by getting a DNC chair. It's like, let's get behind this guy, Keith Ellison. And days after the 2016 general election, like Bernie came out and said, yeah, I'm backing him. And that was the thing that, we were all going to do. And then, of course, a few calls from a few donors.
And a certain 44th president, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. Him too. He got involved. Obama got involved just like he did in 2020. And the super delegates, who's like, okay, like this is another point, is like, who picks the DNC chair? We don't get a vote. You don't get a vote. It's the DNC members. It's the super delegates, And so of course they pick, and who are they? Like they're largely corporate lobbyists. It's like, it's Pfizer has someone, Oracle, Citgo. Like, it's like the DNC is a committee of corporations, and people really don't understand that. And it's like, every corporation sends their representative, and then they deliberate on policy and like the direction of the country. And then the rest of us are left wondering, why didn't it come out in our favor? Why aren't they doing anything progressive? It's like, well, geez, because maybe it's a committee of corporations that's like masquerading as a political party, So they screwed Keith Ellison out of it. Tom Perez becomes the chair. All right, then progressives are like, oh my God, they're shocked. Their mind's blown. Oh my God, where are we going to go next? And then they say, well, let's try to replace the DNC members themselves. Then maybe we can like pick a better chair and stuff like that and get more influence in the party. Well, in the fall of 2017, the DNC and Perez just like literally removed and purged progressive members off the national committee. Like, it's so illegitimate, just like Jim Zogby was one of them. He was one of the few super delegates who had supported Bernie in 2016. He's like, oh, you're out. and 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 so, again, progressives were like, holy shit, this is shocking. And they said, well, what's next, guys? And then they thought, well, 2018 is coming up. Let's see if we can get some progressives elected in 2018, the midterms. So they ran more than 100 at the level of Congress, and they endorsed by Our Revolution, DSA, Brand New Congress, Justice Democrats. Out of those, only two unseated corporate Democrats, AOC and Ayanna Pressley.
Sorry, 2 out of 100? Is that what you're saying?
2 out of 104 that they were endorsing. That's right. Yeah, that's right. And there was never, there was never a reckoning. See, that's the thing. After all of these things, there's never a reckoning. There's never gee, maybe the strategy is flawed. Instead, what happens is the progressive movement lowers its expectations and becomes more incrementalist every time.
Right.
And the reality is, all of this goes back. I mean, we're talking about it in our lifetimes. I'm a little bit older than the rest of y'all, but this goes back to, every single time. I mean, Jesse Jackson when he ran in the primary, Jerry Brown when he ran in the primary. It doesn't. These are the examples that all of us can know people who personally have experience with it, but it goes way back before that. It's the system. It's the way it works. You can't adjust it. And it's because they're a private corporation. And so there's no sense that, can we sue them for cheating us out of our platform? Could we sue them if they pick a different candidate other than the one that wins the most delegates? No, they can do whatever they want. They legally have all the power.
So, yeah, I want to say something to bolster both your points because I, as a journalist, I typically cover gentrification and police violence, mostly here in the Bay Area in California. And, for anyone who's familiar with California politics and the Bay Area politics, it's largely controlled by Democrats. And even though a state like California and a region like the Bay Area, pretty much like the local electoral system is controlled by Democrats, when it comes to, let's say, I've been to numerous local city council meetings in, Oakland and San Francisco and Vallejo, where it's usually let's say if the hot button issue is something related to police violence, or even there was a proposed mass surveillance system that was supposed to be proposed in Oakland in 2013, but there's a lot of local organizing that basically halted that program from being implemented. But a lot of local Democratic politicians in Oakland City Council were largely going along with this massive local surveillance system. When it comes to police brutality, I mean, especially when families want to get justice for their loved ones who are victims of police violence, largely, again, these local elected Democratic council people largely side with police. Then when it comes to, let's say, something like rent control or gentrification, I can't tell you how many times I've been to city councils and the Democrats are largely opposed to something pretty basic as rent control. Rent control is not even public housing. This is just basic rent control. So yeah, I mean, Nick, what you're saying kind of matches with my sort of assessment, which is the Democratic Party largely is structured to be a corporate party and a petty bourgeois party. And I think what happens with a lot of people who are further on the left, to progressive to socialist, I think the perception is that, okay, the Democratic Party's flawed, but these are probably people we can sway, or they're they're still our friends, but we just have to convince them. But at some point, it's wait, you can't convince these people because they're fundamentally opposed to your interests. If you support justice for victims of police violence or expanding rent control or even public housing, and you have a party which I think Nick, I think the way you put it was like just spot on. It's just a committee of corporations. If that's your party, like those two are antagonistic. Like they're two opposing sides. Like there's no way you can kind of convince a party that is wholly in bed with the police system, the prison system, and big corporations and big real estate to concede to, uh, again, something as simple as rent control. And like I said, rent control is not even that far. But if even Democrats in California aren't even willing to go for rent control, that says something about the party.
Well, yeah, the Democratic Party of California is who made it so that we don't have Medicare for all. They got the majority in the legislature. They said that the reason why they couldn't do it before was because of Republicans. Then we give them the majority, and then they throw it in a committee and say, oh, we can't do that. So, yeah, every step of the way, it's like, who's really the bigger threat to our agenda at that point?
And even the progressives that are elected, like, so, like, look at those two that won in 2018, like, AOC. Like, they, enter the minute they're elected, like, the whole Democratic Party theory of change is like, okay, we'll elect some people this cycle, and then we'll elect some more people another cycle, and then another cycle, and then it's like, we'll slowly replace them that way, and then we'll eventually have a majority by 2050. And then it's like, and it's like, but hold on a minute. Like, is anyone stopping to look at what happens to the people who do get elected? That's like the tiny, minuscule, like rounding error of people who get elected. Like, the less than 1%, like AOC. Like, she came in, like, breathing fire, and she was like, we're going to primary all the corporate Democrats in 2020, Justice Democrats. That's where I came out of. And she said, we're going to form a corporate-free caucus because the CPC, she pointed out correctly, takes mostly, the Congressional Progressive Caucus takes most of the members take corporate money. And so, guess what's happened now? She's abandoned her plans to form a corporate-free caucus, and she's not primarying people anymore, basically. Like, she's basically backed off of that. So it's like, wait a minute, so where's the plan to win now? Where's the plan to take over the party?
And I think it's worth saying, why would she do that? It's not because she became shitty in her heart or something like that. But you can't operate in that world effectively. I mean, they have everything on lock. You want to get on a committee? You want to talk to somebody? You want to have any resources to give back to your district at home so that they'll reelect you? Well, you got to play the game, little girl. And that's what will happen to anyone. I mean, that's part of why Bernie Sanders, I think, can't really step into a visionary revolutionary role either, because you don't serve in the Senate for decades and not have to some degree friend up with these people. And even if you can't stand it, you still have to get along with them in order to get anything done for your constituents back home that you're there believing that you're, trying to fight for, who need resources desperately. And so nobody would be able to be in that kind of even in my little water district board, I found that, you want to get anything done, being on the margins doesn't do it, so then you have to figure out, you have to move towards the other side. And, every one of those steps makes it harder for you to hold out when you're also trying to challenge the structure of the whole situation that you're participating in. And so it's an untenable position that these people are in, and they can't hold up. They don't have the clout, they don't have the capacity, and really nobody would, which is, again, why, because the whole structure of the party isn't one that has their back.
Going off that, something that I've been thinking about is that, you guys, of course, are obviously 100% correct in diagnosing the problem of, like, there's no individual person that can be elected that will come in and change it. It doesn't matter how good or how powerful they are or whatever. But America is a very individualistic country. And, even on the left, there are a lot of, perhaps anarchist or libertarian tendencies, and people don't necessarily like working together, or, maybe they read 1984 or something and they think parties are inherently evil, and so they're resistant to throwing in with a left-wing or a workers' party. And I guess, yeah, but the problem is, of course, the only way we can, achieve anything is working collectively. So what do you say to the people who, how do you get these atomized individuals to, coalesce, I guess?
Which individuals?
People, let's, just pretend I'm like an anarchist and I like, you know, I don't like parties, man. I don't really, that's kind of a downer, and I don't, I just do my own thing, right? And explain to me basically that's why that's not good.
Well, I would say that the goal isn't necessarily to like coalesce, what the left, so to speak. I think that where we need to build a party is that we need to build it on the issues that the majority of Americans believe, which are issues that we also happen to believe. Getting money out of politics, it's like 93% majority, out of that, like, and there's like a fury over that. So there's a new political coalition to be built there. Medicare for all, also. I mean, raising wages, eliminating, canceling student debt. Like, there are coalitions to be built around these, like, really visceral, economic issues that, like, affect people's daily lives and, like, really, demolish the quality of their life and really restrict their personal freedom and their mental, and physical health. Like, so it's that, I think, is like the premise for the coalition that needs to be built, that can actually attract like a majority, can realign American politics, like, and attract a majority of working people to it, and then like from across the political spectrum, because people, who vote Republican, they are also, hurting under these issues, and they're also being, deceived by these two parties, like just like people who, are voting Democratic.
I think also that, I mean, the biggest block of people that we have to pull from are people who don't actually participate in voting. And so, and that's a range of people, but the reality is that, polling shows when those people are talked to, that for the most part, the reason why people aren't voting and participating is because they don't believe it does anything, and they don't have any sense of their own power, because either they've tried, somebody they know has tried, and it hasn't resulted in anything. And so I think the task before us is to help people recognize their power. And, I am a leftist because I believe that collective power is the best power, and that when people have an opportunity to work together to fight for their sovereignty and their agency, that then continues to, help feed them to grow and to be, real human beings, which our culture and our society discourages us from tapping into our human beingness. And so I agree with what Nick said. And also, though, I would say, to the hypothetical anarchist, of which, is my roots and background, actually, that, we're talking about working together to meet our needs, organizing for political power collectively, and that ultimately a political party that's going to replace the Democratic Party, also runs people for local office, runs people for state office, and, it serves people's needs and becomes a community and a place where people are working together to realize the communities that they deserve and that they want for their friends and family. And so, that's what we need to do. And anybody who wants to go live on an island, okay. But to me, it's not that different than organizing for, labor movements, labor unions, which unfortunately have mostly been co-opted in this day and age, but that it still is a very important institution that we need, or community groups. And I think that that's part of what I like about the name, that Movement for a People's Party chose. It's not just People's Party, it's Movement for a People's Party, recognizing that the way that we exercise our power is through our movements. And that to me is different than what we normally might think of as a political party.
We're getting close to the end, so let's go for a couple more minutes. But I just want to kind of keep a marker of time. But I wanted to, I don't know if you guys saw Glenn Greenwald's Intercept piece, basically that non-voters are not privileged, and yeah, and I think like this really kind of squares what both you and Nick, Kaitlin and Nick are talking about, because he brings up this Pew Research Center study. It was conducted in basically the end of 2016, but it kind of squares with something I've noticed. So like I'll just read some of these figures and then kind of sort of bring it kind of tell a story that relates to it. But so like it says when it comes to non-voters, when you break it down by race, so the majority of voters, 74% are white. 10% are black, 10% Hispanic, and 5% other. When you look at non-voters, 52% are white, 15% are black, 19% are Hispanic, and 12% are other. And then I didn't really like know when you get into education and income, it's even more striking. So non-voters, 51% have a high school diploma or less. That's just like high school diploma or less, 51%. Some college, 33%. 16% are at least college graduates. With voters, it's mostly the majority, or the plurality, 37% are college graduates, 34% have some college, and 30% have less than a high school diploma. And then when you look at income, the largest bulk is between $30,000 a year and $74,999 a year. 33% is 75,000 or more, 28% is less than 30,000. This is just for voters. Amongst non-voters, the majority, 56%, make less than 30,000 a year. So if you look at like the people who don't vote, like what you get is largely non-white, largely working class and low income. And well, I mean, outside of freelance writing, I work at a community college. I mean, now with the quarantine, I have to do the online education, which that's this whole other can of worms that I won't go into. But when I was actually doing face-to-face teaching, one of the community colleges I work in is in Richmond, California, and my student population is mostly black and Hispanic, with some Asians, and white people are actually the minority in terms of numbers. But for the most part, in terms of income, it's largely like a low-income, blue-collar area. If anyone's familiar with Richmond, California, like it's similar to where I live in Pittsburgh. It's a very like kind of post-industrial, working-class, largely non-white area. And I know a lot of students who just don't vote. But like, they care. Like they obviously care about issues. Like, I've had conversation with students about police violence because it's something that hits home for them. Poverty, obviously things like education affordability and education access and equality, like that's something that they care about. Immigration is a large issue for a lot of them because I have a lot of students. I've had some students who are DACA recipients. But the thing is a lot like I was talking to one of my coworkers, and he was kind of lamenting like, how come, like why don't these kids vote? Like why aren't you voting? Blah blah blah. And I was thinking about it, I'm like, I can kind of see why they don't vote, because if you're on that kind of edge of American society and the American economic system in which like you're pretty much at the bottom, like your reaction to the system is you're going to be a lot more cynical, because you're going to look at the two-party system. This whole system is like, what the fuck have you done for me? Like, yeah, like I can vote Democrat or Republican, but hey, there's still poverty in my neighborhood. There's still crime in my neighborhood. The police are still going to shoot me. It's getting gentrified. Things are getting worse. So, if you're in that position, I think there are a lot of people in those communities who feel like, why the fuck should we vote? And it kind of translates into these figures that Greenwald pointed out. But I guess one question I have is for both of you guys, because this is something I've been saying often, like that I think gets left does not get mentioned enough in these left-wing media spaces that should be talked about is, and I think this is where the Sanders campaign kind of messed up in 2020, is that I think Sanders was too focused on mobilizing his sort of coalition of already kind of hardened leftists and socialists, but there wasn't enough to reach these non-voters, like the kinds who are like my students, right? Like people who live in those communities that have been pretty much fucked over for generations. I think like there is a kind of problem within the quote unquote left of like, we say these ideas, but like, are we actually really engaging with some of the worst hit communities that are hit by, neoliberal trade policies, redlining, gentrification, all these other things, right? So that's something I've been wondering, but I want to kind of hear from you guys, just like, especially as we kind of talk about organizing a people's party, like how do we mobilize people who I think rightly don't vote because they see the electoral system as like, it does not matter if I vote Democrat or Republican. At the end of the day, I'm still screwed. I'm still living in poverty. My neighborhood still sucks. Things are going to get worse and worse and worse. And they may look at like CNN or MSNBC and a lot of these like kind of liberal pundits and like them, kind of wagging their finger like, if you don't vote for Biden, you're going to have Trump in office and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, who the fuck is going to listen to that? So I want to know from you guys, like, how do we reach people, who are rightfully angry at the electoral system to get them actually politically mobilized for something a lot more transformative?
Well, I think Bernie would have had a lot easier time doing that in the general if he had been able to win the primary. But the problem with the Democratic Party primary process is that you are more having to reach out to these more likely voters, which means more privileged voters, and kind of sell yourself to them. And then you got to pivot over to, that's what he kept saying. And that's why I think he was absolutely right that he had a better chance of beating Trump than anybody else, because I think he could have reached those people better, not because so much Bernie Sanders, but because a progressive populist message, a leftist progressive populist message is actually what folks want. And that would have been exciting and that would have been something different. But our candidates don't have an opportunity to get into that general because they're having to appease Democratic primary voters by playing that Democratic primary game. And that would be, I think, another reason why you sidestep out of that. You build a party and you talk about politics in a different way. And then you're up against, the corporate parties in the general, and you don't have to appease to their most likely voters who are the most conservative amongst them.
I agree with that, and I think you also need to make politics a lot more accessible than it is right now to people, and a lot more relevant than it is now, And so, like, with the, some of the left, and particularly, like, the mainstream media, they make fun of, Trump, for the way that he speaks, but the way that Trump speaks, like, connects with people, like he uses a simple language. He's, not grandiose, and it works. It actually kind of, it connects with people. And so I feel like the left also needs to like simplify its messaging. It needs to, and it needs to be very direct and plain spoken. It needs to be accessible.
Yeah, like, oh man, that just reminds me. I had one of my students, because I teach English, so like I have students like ask me like to help them with their papers, and at a community college level, we're kind of like the in between of high school and academia. So like we're usually preparing students to communicate in an academic environment. And academic language is not the same as everyday language that everyday people speak. And I had one student who just hit the nail on the head. She's like, Adam, like, this is not my language. I don't get it. You got to help me. And like, what you said, Nick, I think like when people look at politics, I think it's kind of similar that like, there is a kind of, obviously we're all speaking English, duh. And like, yeah, the history of the English language is like the reason why we speak it is because of imperialism and all that. Okay, got it. But there is a difference between like how people talk in normal conventional news and then how everyday people talk with each other and how they articulate their needs and aspirations and how they feel. But yeah, no, I agree with that. Like what you just said, just kind of reminded me of something one of my students said that I think kind of it spoke volumes. That I think, and it also kind of ties into, I think, even if you look at a lot of effective political leaders and revolutionaries throughout history, one common factor is that they're able to speak directly to people in like plain no bullshit language. Like I know exactly what you're thinking. I can speak your language and I can articulate your demands. Obviously, Trump is not revolutionary. I don't want to put him in that category, but there is an art to political communication that, yeah, he's obviously like a neo-fascist, but in terms of how he's able to communicate to his base, yeah, there's something there in terms of political rhetoric that I don't think the left has really truly mastered as a technique in terms of political communication that I think is worth studying. Because a lot of lefty spaces that I've been in are very like, a lot of it sounds like a Harvard law school seminar and not like a pub, you know?
Well, it's really elitist and it's really academic, and that's just true, and people's sort of love of Obama and the way he talks. He sort of does that the best, and that's what especially white elitist, upper class Americans want. That's what they feel comfortable with, But give me a Rashida Tlaib any day.
So yeah, I guess we'll probably be winding down quickly, but I guess my last question is this. Obviously the experiences of the 2016-2020 primaries among, all of American history has shown, sort of the ruthlessness and there's no length to which, the bourgeoisie will go to protect its interest. And while, of course, it's obviously a fool's errand, as we've, laid out in many different ways of trying to achieve that reform in the Democratic Party, certainly, once, it's what, once you guys, if you guys start to get some success, some traction, it's only a matter of time before, the media starts turning its, fire on you and, starts, making all sorts of slanders up and all that stuff. I guess my question is how, what lessons have been learned such that, you'll be ready to deal with that? Because that's really the big struggle, I think, in breaking through and actually, becoming a dominant party.
There's been a flourishing of independent media since the Bernie campaign of the first one, and in fact the establishment realized what a threat it was to it since then, and that's kind of why they embarked on the fake news crusade. It was as a pretext to clamp down on independent media and social media, which had powered the Bernie campaign. They realized, oh wow, this is like a threat to us. People are communicating and organizing beyond the scope of our control, peer-to-peer, bypassing gatekeepers of information. And so what they've done since then is they've tried to clamp down on the algorithms on social media, like, put a lid on organic kind of organizing and things that go viral. And also, tried to kind of like suppress independent YouTube content. But tellingly, they still have not been able to contain the growth of independent media. And it goes to show that the kind of hunger that is out there, despite all of the different tricks, the shadow banning and unsubscribing, everything they do, you've still seen the explosion of channels, that are like these populist progressive channels like Jimmy Dore and Rising now. Jimmy Dore's up to 700,000 subscribers, and that's mostly within the last 4 years. Rising has gone just in a matter of like months. It's gone from a few thousand to about 400,000 subscribers. So people are gravitating to these voices, and and I think that they can break through.
Certainly, I love the the growth of independent media. I remember the bad old days when all you had was Alternet. Um, Shout out to Alternet. But I feel like one of the lessons, or at least that's what they said, is that that you still can't break through the Democratic Party faithful who listens to NPR, watches MSNBC, and supports all of the ideas, but are just locked in. And I guess, is there any how do you break through to those people?
There are those people, but they are a small minority actually. Like the numbers are really overestimated, and so like the Gallup polls on what people's party affiliation is has broken it down pretty well. And it's shown that there's about 42% of the country that's independent, and there's 27% that's Democrat and Republican. But then they further zoomed in on those people who still self-identify as Democrat and Republican, and they asked them, well, are you happy being a Democrat or Republican, or would you rather be a part? Do you still think that we need a major new party? And they found that half of those 27% of Democrats and half of the 27% of Republicans also said that we need a new party. So that boils down to 13% of Americans who are happily Democrats and about 12% who are happily Republicans. And the rest of the country is just fed up with this system. And so that tells you that kind of like the myth of party loyalty, that people are like, just I'm blue no matter who, is like, that is a lot smaller than a lot of people believe.
What's really important is that we show people that there is an alternative, and that's something that they can connect with and believe in, and that is viable. And that's why it's so important that this new party be big and have the feeling of the moment. And so I just want to make sure your listeners know about demexit.us, which is our website that we created coming out of, we had started a group called Burn the DNC that was going to do a protest and shut down of the convention if they stole the primary from Sanders, and then coronavirus and South Carolina combo made that not how we planned. And so we, kind of started to pivot over to Demexit, recognizing that having people leave the Democratic Party was going to come sooner than the convention, and then Movement for a People's Party joined up with us on that, and then we decided to kind of just merge into Movement for a People's Party. So if people go to demexit.us, they can help us show the numbers of people who are not interested in playing their game, and also check out peoplesparty.org. But I think that, a lot of it is going to have to be talking to our friends. So sharing it on social media, but also, text these links, email them to folks, and talk to people directly. And I'm sure that all of the listeners to the show, know people who are either ready to leave the Democratic Party, or already have, or never were part of it, but who would love to help us kill the Democratic Party. And that's step one, right? So help us come do that. And we have to, the good news too is that the other thing I wanted to say is that a lot of the people who believe mainstream media are older folks. And as time goes on, that's less and less relevant. And so the sort of captivated audience listening to the propaganda from the corporate parties is shrinking. And I have a lot of hope in that too.
Yeah, no, that's true. I just want to echo that, Kaitlin. Yeah, when it comes to people who watch like cable news and MSNBC and it's a larger, usually larger, like kind of more boomer to older Gen X kind of crowd who listen to that, whereas young people like millennials and Gen Z are a lot more, online when it comes to listening to media. So yeah, I think that's something I noticed. I think that cable news is largely a boomer and older Gen X kind of crowd. I don't have any other questions. Do you have another question, Peter, or let's wrap this up?
I mean, I certainly could talk about this a while because I think this is, a task of world historical proportions. And so it's something that I will definitely be following you guys and trying to figure out, you know, where this thing's going because I am personally of the idea that like as sort of the worker as a working class movement is developing in the United States, of which we have no choice but to develop one, a party will be essential for that. And so, certainly, I will. I've been trying to figure out sort of where to put my, sort of whatever political energies that I have, trying to figure out who to get behind. So I will definitely be looking. I will definitely be watching you guys and seeing. I definitely I'm behind you guys 100% because the immediacy of the moment is what I think is key.
Well, we'd love to have you with us, Peter and Adam.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just to kind of lay my chips on the table. Like I have not voted for a Democrat in the general election since 2008. And to kind of echo something Kaitlin said earlier, for those of you who don't know about California's primary system, we do technically have an open primary. So if you're registered like nonpartisan slash independent, you're allowed to vote in the Democratic Party. But sometimes like there's weird kind of shenanigans. So to vote for Bernie Sanders in the primary, I re-registered as a Democrat to vote for Bernie Sanders in this primary. But now that he's out, I went back to being registered as a nonpartisan, non-affiliated, independent voter, and I've been that way for a long time, like over a decade at this point. So which actually, as a journalist, kind of I feel like suits me well because it kind of gives me a sense of distance from the two party system, and I kind of feel a little bit more. It's easier for me to kind of openly criticize the two party system because I just have no personal stake in it. So yeah, Kaitlin, when you say like basically destroy the Democratic Party, I've that's something I felt for a while. Like I don't I have no faith or stake in this two party system because yeah, it's been bad for a while, and so that's why I'm so glad that you guys came on this show because that it's just something I've seen in lefty media, which is that like a lot of the energy and political energy gets kind of sucked. It gets sucked up in the two party system all the time. I think there's like this saying that the Democratic Party is like the graveyard of movements. Like that's where movements go to die, and that's been something that's been happening, for a long time, and we're in along with us being in like real deep shit when it comes to this, not just the health and human impact of this pandemic, but also the economic fallout, even like the mental health fallout that like I'm not even like because it's people being isolated for such a long time, there's going to be some mental health repercussions from that. But like even looking at the economic fallout from that, like I don't know if we're fully prepared. So we're in a very kind of unprecedented, almost like uncharted moment in history. I mean, you know, it totally disproves Francis Fukuyama's thesis of the end of history. Like that's just gone. Like history's in motion now. Like there is history, and we're in the middle of history happening on, on a scale that like we can't even fathom. So yeah, I definitely just tip my hat off to you guys and the work you're doing because I think it's super, it's incredibly important, especially in the moment that we're in because I think what I appreciate about what you guys are doing is that you're at least articulating that there is an alternative to this current state of affairs, which I think that's what's missing on the left, so to speak, the quote unquote left in America is what is the actual alternative, and like is there a light at the end of the tunnel
Absolutely.
beyond this
and,
morass? Yeah.
For me, especially when you layer on top climate change, but certainly coronavirus kind of put an even finer point on it. It's like, I'm not interested in just getting killed off without trying really, really hard and putting everything that we can. And if we're going to survive as a species, we have to evolve to do shit differently than we have been doing it. But we also don't need to think that this is the way human beings have been our whole existence, because that's not actually true. We are a cooperative people. We are community minded. We take care of each other. People like to work. People like to have meaningful work. I mean, all the things we want are actually in our DNA. And we can take this opportunity and take the agency that we deserve and that we know how to actually exercise. Every single one of us has it. And so that's what I'm excited to do. And if y'all want to team up with us, then, please. But it's so important that we have people spreading the word and helping folks know that there are alternatives out there. So thanks for the work that you do on your podcast. And if people want to continue the conversation with me, the best place to find me is on Twitter. So it's Kaitlin, Kaitlin _SB.
Great. Nick, are you on Twitter? Like, what's your socials, or what's the way for if people want to get in touch with you?
Twitter is also great. That is, I'm Nick _Brana. And then also, I would say, the best way to come and participate in all of this and be a part of it is go to peoplesparty.org and sign up to volunteer there and join our Slack team. That's where we're communicating on a daily basis, and we're functioning in a decentralized way with working groups. And that's where you can contribute. So this is the moment, like you guys said, and it's been great being on. Really appreciate it.
Oh yeah, no, I thank you. Yeah, so yeah, for you listeners, if you guys are, I mean, I know a lot of our listeners are, the reason why they're following us is because they are fed up with the two-party system. So, yeah, like and especially because, this coronavirus and this pandemic is putting the global order in total jeopardy, and I think there's a kind of sense of hopelessness that people feel. So if you're feeling hopelessness with the state of affairs, or if you're just totally jaded and disappointed, because I know, like, I have friends of mine who are, musicians and whatnot, who feel jaded. And so if you're one of those people and you feel jaded and you're just feeling just angry and frustrated, look, check out People's Party, Dem Exit, any kind of organization. I mean, definitely this isolation is making it harder to physically organize, but, we kind of have to, be creative at this point. But, that's it. Do you have anything else to add, Peter? Because we can just close out.
Keep up the good work.
Sweet. Yeah. So anyway, Nick, Kaitlin, thank you so much for coming on. And for listeners, if you like this episode and you want more, donate. We're an independent podcast, so the way you can keep us running is to subscribe to our Patreon. Patreon.com/Real Sankara Hours. That's patreon.com/Real Sankara Hours. Follow us on our Podbean to keep up with our RSS feed. You can download it. We're on Spotify, so you can stay up to date with our episodes as we keep going on. I know people like to listen to podcasts on different platforms like iTunes, Spotify, RSS feeds, and SoundCloud. So we're still trying to get on iTunes, but our RSS feed is there. It's easier to follow us from that. And yeah, if you're jaded with the system, check out People's Party, Dem Exit, support independent media, and let's work together. Let's work together to make this world better, or at least make it less shitty than it is now.